Hi everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have a few people coming in that could just find their seat and get something from the back and join on in. Good evening everyone, my name is Renee and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Fayetteville Public Library. Welcome to those of you who are watching through live stream as well. Before you leave today, please take a moment to fill out the evaluation forms we've left on the table for you. These forms help us plan for future programs. We are so glad to partner with the Northwest Arkansas Beekeepers Association for this series of classes. The Northwest Arkansas Beekeepers Association promotes the benefits of bees and beekeeping in Northwest Arkansas, whether you're involved in backyard gardening or large-scale agricultural operations. With over 225 members, the association has grown to become one of Arkansas's largest regional clubs for beekeeping. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jay Davidson. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks, everybody. Glad y'all could make it. For those, there was a little bit of confusion on the email, I think. If you missed last Monday, so did everybody else. So we were here, but we were in the back hiding in the shelter. So what we've done is we have, and we'll explain a little later, we've taken the program. We don't want you to miss out. There's some important points in that first session. We've consolidated some. So a little different format. We will probably ask you to hold questions until the end. So if you didn't pick up a notepad, grab one. They're out here in the hall. We got plenty of pens. Write your questions down. We'll have an open Q&A session at the end. But you'll see us kind of moving a little quicker through our slides tonight. So some people say it's a good thing. We can knock this out in 2 nights instead of 3, all the better. A couple on the housekeeping side. Plenty of snacks on the back. If you didn't see them or participate, please help yourselves at any time. We've got the white receptacle bins for recycled materials. And as Renee mentioned, the class surveys are very important to both the library and to us. We really need your feedback. We do these classes from time to time. It's been we try to do them annually. We can do them more frequently, whatever. But we do need your feedback as far as, too much detail. We're all beekeepers. We live this stuff. Sometimes for new beekeepers, we get a little too far down the rabbit hole, as it were, on some of these topics. So please let us know what you think and make sure it gets counted for our next classes. Without further ado, I think tonight we're going to cover the intro to beekeeping. We'll do a quick on bee biology. Earl will talk to us a little bit about the various hive components, and then Wynn, very important about where to locate your hive. So with a little bit about the series, as I said, part 1, November 4th, that was a bust, bad weather. We'll cover this tonight, and then next Monday, a week from tonight, we'll cover actual bee installation and hive management and inspections. We'll cover a little bit about pests and treatments. A lot of material we're cramming into part 3, but that's what we're planning for next Monday evening. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Xavier Price. Oh, there you are. Where's Xavier? There you go.
All right, thank you, Jay. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So glad that you were able to join us on this second/first night of our beginning beekeeping classes. My name is Xavier Price. I've been a beekeeper since about 2014, 2015. I have my master's in entomology and my bachelor's in plant science biotechnology. And I've always wanted to be a scientist, so it is my pleasure today to speak to you about the importance of pollinators and how to become better stewards of the land. And I was also able to found my own beekeeping company called Xavier Apiary and Agricultural Ventures, and I basically help anyone from getting restarted to mentoring to apiary manager all the way up so that you can be your own beekeeper and help spread the word. So let's get started with why they are important. So in general, about 80% of all the flowering plants and about 3/4 of all the staple crops that feed us, they rely on animal pollinators. And so globally, if you think about the 115 food crops, 87 or 75% of those are actually directly consumed by humans, and 35% of that are what depend on the animal populators. And when it comes down to commercial pollination, that, recorded even way back in 2016, 2017, was about an $18 billion industry in the U.S. alone. And commercial pollination, 90% of that is performed by managed colonies of honeybees. And the thing about honeybees, they contribute heavily to biodiversity. They're specialist foragers, which you'll learn here shortly. And so pretty much if it's got nectar or pollen, a honeybee is going to visit it and get those resources and thus transfer that pollen and help those flowers regenerate. And then there are some species of bees that aren't honeybees that actually are necessary. For instance, the orchid bee is necessary to pollinate a particular orchid. So they have that symbiotic relationship. Without that bee, that orchid wouldn't exist, and vice versa. So another topic, they are bioindicators of environmental health. I could really go on about that topic alone, but basically, we were put on this earth with one earth, and all we have is a set amount of soil. And until we start growing in space, the soil is where all of our food comes from, our natural food. And so if your soil is unhealthy, you'll grow plants that are unhealthy, or none at all. And then those plants that do come up, if the bees visit them, whether they've been sprayed by chemicals or you have contaminated soils due to runoff or anything like that, those bees are going to somehow incorporate into their colony at some point. And so if you don't have a healthy colony or a healthy population of bees in your area, it's quite possible that you might need to look at some environmental factors that may be affecting anything from your soil quality to your air quality. And they also aid in various life cycles and processes, from food chain contributions on up to life stage progressions. Again, that circle of life. Larger animals feed on smaller animals in their earlier stages, and bees also play a part in that. And so it's just really something to think about when you think about why are bees important. And so talking about bees, we also got to think about, well, what are these other commercial pollinators, animal pollinators I mentioned? So we have two groups of vertebrate pollinators, which are birds and bats. And then we have our invertebrate pollinators, which are our butterflies and moths, our wasps and our bees. We have beetles, and we even have flies. And so a lot of the insect pollinators, for one reason or another, visit our flowers, and through either just foraging or actually using those flowers, they help pollination continue on. And so in general, we want to talk about tonight are the bees. They're part of the order Hymenoptera, which means membranous wings. And they're also in that group that consists of wasps, ants, and sawflies as well. And when it comes down to bees, there are about 7 families of bees worldwide, and 6 of those are in the U.S., and the last one there is actually located in Australia by itself. And so when we get down into bees, both native and honeybees, you have 2 groupings. So you have solitary bees and you have social bees. Basically, the solitary bees are the ones that they'll go off, and the females themselves will construct their colony, construct their nest, get the things for that, and they do it by themselves without their other members of their group actually helping. And so then you have the social bees, which you know of, the honeybees. They construct hives, they produce and store honey and wax, and they have a caste system. So bees, wasps, termites, they have that caste system, which you'll learn about later on tonight. And then we also have 2 nesting styles. We have ground nesters and we have cavity nesters. When you think of a cavity nester, those are the ones that like to nest pretty much in trees and plant stems, branches, or on the ground with old beetle burrows, rat nests, etc. And then we have the ground nesters that actually do internal systems. And so I'll just go through a couple of those to give you an idea of the vast number of pollinators we have, and native and honeybees in general. So your ground nesters, you have I'm sure you've seen a couple of these around your way. Minor bees, you have the milited bees, plaster and polyester bees, and one of the largest groups are the sweat bees. And as you can see, they come in all different colors and configurations, but they still have that basic shape of the 2 wings and the eyes. But they pretty much populate different areas, and these are our general ground nesters. And then next we have the cavity nesters. They're more interesting when you actually find their hives. If you can see here, the mason and the leafcutter bees, this is the exterior of what their hive would be, and then this is the cross section where they have everything from food to babies. And then you have probably the more well-known pest bees sometimes, your carpenter bees, and that beautiful orchard bee. Yes, carpenter bees do like to drill into our deckings and whatnot and have those lovely holes. But again, if you look into that cross section, you can see that cavity, and this is pretty much how they go about doing their business. So we have those cavity nesters and ground nesters, and now we're getting more focused into our honeybees and our bumblebees. Both are considered cavity nesters, and the thing about honeybees versus bumblebees is that honeybees are the ones that have perennial colonies or pretty much maintain their colony year-round, and bumblebees are the ones, the queen, throughout, they'll have basically annual colonies, so they'll have a lifespan throughout the year, and down towards the winter, the new queens will actually overwinter, the rest of the colony dies, and that new queen that survives will emerge and go out and construct her own nest and do it all over again. Our honeybees are the ones that, in my mind, more resilient, and they like to nest in trees, high up, things of that nature, sometimes in the ground, but this is the natural honeybee hive right here. And so what we do as beekeepers, or humans, our hive boxes, which you'll learn later tonight, actually mimic what is out there in the wild, so that way we can better manage them and not destroy these beautiful structures. We actually have them more contained. And so just getting again into the significance of our bees, in Arkansas alone, I was happy when I moved back to the state. I'm actually from Louisville, Arkansas, and noticed that the honeybee is the state insect of Arkansas. And a long time ago, they figured that because of its valuable contribution to agriculture, they recognized that with the 18 billion in commercial pollination, that they were important, so much so that it's even in the official seal of Arkansas. So I'm very proud to be beekeeping in this state, and I hope you'll have that same sentiment by the time you're done with our classes here. And so now we want to get, one more time, I want to touch on native bees because in some instances they are just as important as honeybees. There are about 4,000 species of native bees in North America alone, and out of that pocket we have about 400 to 650 that are in Arkansas. We don't have an exact number, but you can see that range, and we're discovering new ones as years go on. And it's interesting because native bees honeybees are not considered native bees. And the question might come up since I've gotten here, well, why is that the case? Are they really not native? So the TLDR about the I guess, discussions that we have in the scientific community about native bees versus managed bees. They're not native in North America. They were first brought over from somewhere in Europe around 1622 by the English settlers, and that's when the colonies were around. And that particular species of bee was Apis mellifera mellifera. And a common name for that is either the European, the German, or the black bees. And when it comes to spreading across the U.S., they didn't naturally cross the Rocky Mountains. They were actually transported by Mormon pioneers to Utah by the 1840s, and then by ship to California in the early 1850s. And so when we get into really thinking about, well, are they native versus introduced, I want to say that the common opinion really is they've been here for about 400 years. And as you just learned, they're a very integral part of our agricultural system. And so why wouldn't we consider them to be native at this point? And then if you really get into the conservationist standpoint, or the university ideal sometimes, it's more or less along the line, you really want to encourage the proliferation of your native pollinators, of your native bees first, before you introduce honeybees into your landscape. Now, if you've already done that, or you already know for a fact that I don't really have enough pollinators to help my watermelons grow or my gourds, and I'm having a low yield, I think the best option is to bring in a managed honeybee colony, and that way you become a beekeeper and you'll be increasing the pollination coefficient of that area. And so it's a win-win. It's just, I think you should take some time sometimes to think about, is it necessary to bring in honeybees right away? Because you might have an instance of where you might throw off the balance between your native bee population and your managed bee population. But again, it's kind of a case-to-case basis, so it's good not to think about it too hard. But thinking about the general bigger picture overall, pollinator habitats. Us as humans, we can plant flowers, wildflower settings, set up bird baths and things of that nature to help our pollinators kind of localize and want to stay around to where pretty much we want them to be, so we can manage them, and also so that way they'll have that constant supply of food. And so what you want to do is plant native species, especially here in Arkansas, and you want to have a diverse group of seeds. So that way you can set up plants that basically bloom throughout the year, and that the bees can have that constant, or the pollinators can have that constant flow of food, and they're not in the period where they would initially need feeding, or they could leave because that resource is no longer there when they need it. And so it could take some doing to really figure that out, but we do have resources for that. And again, your goal should be to have, to benefit all the pollinators and the other wildlife as well, whether it's food or it's cover, whether it be for quail or deer, things of that nature. planting pollinator habitats and having that in mind can really help your ecosystem and that wildlife. If you're not, if you don't have a backyard garden, or if you have a large cropping system and you want to help our pollinators, but you don't really know what's the best way to get into it, you could really use your fallow areas and plant them into a wonderful wildlife planting. You can also do your the rural roadsides. If you're involved in any type of adopt a street or adopt a highway programs, definitely wonderful places to plant some type of wildlife access for pollinators all over to come through and check it out. And again, with cropping system, if you have that fallow field margin that doesn't have anything in it, go ahead and beautify that for your pollinators, especially along that tree line. And that's just something minor you can do. It's out of the way. You weren't really using it anyway, and nature will be able to take over, and I'm sure they'll thank you for it. Last thing I want to touch on right quick is I mentioned the resources. So Quail Forever and Pheasants Forever have partnered with USDA NRCS, which I'm a member of, and they have something called seed mixes. And basically these seed mixes have been researched to have the right amount of flowers for your area, native species and not introduced species, ones that bloom throughout the year. All that calculated I mentioned before, if you go to their website, all of those are figured up, and all you have to do is buy pounds of those seeds, or you can just check out the list of those flowers and you can make up that mix yourself. Another area I like to plug is the Pollinator Partnership and the Xerxes Society. Two wonderful online resources for invertebrate pollination and anything pollinator related. So if you really want to get down deep, from posters to outreach to just general knowledge, those two websites will help as well. I left some USDA pamphlets up front. Be sure to pick one up and take a look at it and see if there's something you might be interested in partnering with USDA to help get your land beautified. And with that, that is all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Xavier. If you're needing a chair, there's still some, or if you want to come grab some of these at the front tables, and bring them back if you need them. Everybody got a chair? Good deal. Oh, here it is. Bee biology. Every beekeeper needs a basic understanding of bee biology. Promise I won't get scientific on you. If I start reminding you of your biology class in high school, throw something at me, we'll liven it up a little bit. But really the goal is to understand what bees are trying to do so that it makes it easier for you to work with them and not try to work against them. Okay, they've kind of got their way of doing things. They figured out over a couple million years. And as a beekeeper, if you come in and try to change that, probably not going to work out too well. So what we're trying to do is understand both the basic bee biology and the basic bee behavior so that we can encourage them to do what we want them to do the way they like to do it. So what do bees want? Bees want a nice, sheltered, dark cavity somewhere, typically in a tree, something like that. They want adequate size for growth, and they want a defensible entrance. They like a little nice 1-inch hole in the tree where they can come and go and they can easily defend it. What they do in that is they construct, these parallel combs within those tree trunks, and they organize that comb based on brood and food, what's going to work best for them. So as beekeepers, that's kind of how the modern hive is patterned after that. We're trying to provide them with a nice dark cavity with adequate size for growth and a defensible entrance is really what we're trying to do. So the colony, all the bees in the hive function as a unit to survive and propagate. So it's really, if you remember your biology class, what we call a superorganism, because they're all working together as one to accomplish those goals. Basic anatomy, there won't be a quiz on this, but the big thing is people just need to be able to identify. As you're reading other materials, you talk about the head, the thorax, the abdomen. That's these, here's the thorax, here's the abdomen, here's the head. Obviously the business end of a bee, typically here, pollen baskets here on their legs. Obviously large compound eyes and antenna, which is what they smell with. They actually breathe. They don't breathe from their mandibles or their mouth. Bees actually breathe from a little organ behind up here where the wings are attached, roughly. So You won't see them breeding that way. Yeah, I'll keep moving. There's basically 3 castes of bees in the beehive. You know, there's going to be workers, there's going to be a queen, and there's going to be drones. Each has their role within the hive. Each are physically a little bit different. The worker bees, that's going to make up 90% of your population, 85 to 95, depending on time of year, but population of your hive. You know, they're all female, all the workers are females. They're responsible basically for doing all the work. They're the ones that, you know, they clean the hive, they feed the young, they forage for resources. They basically do 99% of the work that goes on within a hive. So they have a very short lifespan. Now, it says up here we have 3 to 5 years or 3 to 5 weeks lifespan in the you know, early part of the spring and summer when all they're they're hoofing it back and forth. They're trying to take advantage of the nectar flow. They'll work themselves to death in 3 weeks, no problem. They'll live longer, 5 weeks in the summer, sometimes earlier in the spring. What I won't get into is there is a thing called winter bees. They raise bees of a little different genetics late in the fall, and those bees, they typically will live for potentially months at a time. But as a general rule, most of your worker bees in your hive, you can expect the population to turn over. So what does this tell us about being a beekeeper? What this tells you is, oh, my hive is full of bees, it's all good. Well, if you don't have brood and you don't have eggs, that population can go from booming to nothing in as little as 4 to 5 weeks. So again, understanding kind of these basics is what will help you as a beekeeper. So I'll just keep reinforcing that as we go through this. Obviously specialized bodies, you know, they've adapted with pollen sacs in their legs and stingers for defense. They are the backbone, as I mentioned. They're 85, 90% of the hive are these guys, or girls, sorry. Definitely all girls. Queen bee, there's typically only one in a hive. Their role is to lay eggs. That's what they do. They lay eggs and they kind of regulate the hive. People say, oh, it's great, it's queen bee. Before you attribute too much human characteristics to the queen, if the queen's not doing her job well, they'll replace her. The rest of the hive will kill her, kick her out, and they'll raise a new queen. So the workers can raise a new queen when that becomes necessary. We'll talk about that a little bit. They do live a lot longer, 2 to 5 years. You know, you'll hear some beekeepers in the commercial space especially will replace their queens every year. They want a young queen. They don't want issues. They want maximum productivity. So the younger queens are typically a little bit more productive. I'll leave that to you. We can talk about that in detail at one of our club meetings about queens and how long to keep them. But just know that they will live longer. Physical distinction, she's obviously larger, longer abdomen and a slender shape. She releases pheromones that regulate the hive's social behavior and influence the development of the bees. You know, what you'll learn is, you know, when there's not a queen present in the hive and she's not releasing that pheromone into the hive, we'll talk about that more here in a minute, the hive gets pissy quick. They all just, you'll approach the hive and hear this buzz going on. They're not happy. They're not happy unless they got a queen. Drones, the drones, they only have one purpose in life, and that's to mate. That's really all they do. They don't have a stinger at all, so you can go to a hive and you can pick up a drone and carry it around and do whatever. There's no stinger. Their sole job is to mate. They're a little bit larger. They've got these really big eyes to spot passing queens. So that's what they're looking for, and that's really all they're going to do. They can't collect honey, pollen. They rely on the workers to feed them. They go into the hive, and the girls feed them, and they get fed, and they go back out cruising for new queens. Before you you know, the drones are typically produced in the spring and the summer, and the hive will push for 10 to 15%. But when the hive is done with drones, they kick them out, and they just starve to death. When it gets to be fall and there's no longer any need for the guys hanging around when there's no more queens in the area, they're going to kick them out. And you'll see them out on the board, kind of gathered there sometimes. A lot of times you'll just see them on the ground. They've been summarily dismissed. So, and that's the end of their lives. High-level life cycle really is the queen lays an egg. You know, the egg looks like a little rice kernel standing straight up in the bottom of the cell. So it's this tiny little, and that's why a lot of times you'll see beekeepers holding that frame up to the sun and maybe squinting a little bit, looking real close. What they're looking for is eggs. Because if you got eggs in your hive, you know you got a laying queen. Even if you didn't see the queen, if I got eggs in there, I know that in the last 5 days, I've had a queen cruising around in here laying eggs. So again, back to why bee biology. So as you see these things in your hive, gives you a sense of what's going on. I see eggs, fairly confident I got a queen. I got an active queen. Larvae in about 6 days. These just look like little grubs, little white grubs of different sizes. They start out pretty small, and then they look like a real, like a grub you might find in the ground. And then in day 10, worker bees will cap that off, and they'll enter the pupa stages. And then after 21 days, a worker bee emerges. And we'll go over the difference. This is a worker bee, because again, that's 90% of the bees in your colony. Queens are a little quicker to emerge. Drones are a little slower to emerge. But for the most part, this is kind of the cycle. During this time period, they're fed a little bit of royal jelly as the larva. The workers are all feeding these larvae until they're capped. So all these young nurse bees, we'll talk about those a little bit, are feeding the larvae until, but once they cap them, that's all they get. And until they emerge as adults. The stages of development for the various castes, as I mentioned, that was 21 days on this worker. You know, a queen is an egg for 3 days, larva, pupa, and then emerges in day 16. So a little different. But again, knowing when you've got a queen cell in your hive and it's sealed, then you have a pretty good approximation, if you know when it was sealed, of when you might expect that queen to emerge. Same thing, if you see capped worker brood, you have a pretty good idea of when that's going to emerge and contribute to the population of the hive. So this is a good chart to keep in mind. I'm sure you'll see it in other places as well. Back to worker bees real quick. The worker bees' roles within the hive do change with age. So as soon as a worker bee emerges, the first thing they're going to do, they start out as nurse bees. And the first job they have is cleaning cells. So they emerge, they get a little food from the other workers in the hive, and then they start going around cleaning all the other cells and making sure they're ready for the next eggs to be laid in them. So that's what they do. In 3 to 6 days, they'll start producing, royal jelly and start the feeding cycle. They'll start feeding other larvae. And then as they get a little bit older, they stop being able to produce royal jelly, and they're feeding the older bees honey. The house bees also, at about day 9, these glands on their abdomens can start producing wax. So these little flakes of wax they're producing from glands on their abdomen, they take that flakes of wax that are being excreted by those glands on their abdomen, they work it in their mandible, and that's what they build the wax with. And they'll pass the stuff, one's making it, chewing it up, making a ball, they'll pass it around. With a lot of our foundation hives, they're building on something. If you have they're building out from a foundation that you've provided. In nature, they're hanging from, or if you have a foundationless frame, I use a lot of those. You'll see the bees, there'll be 8 or 9 bees hanging onto each other's legs. At the top is where they're going to connect the comb. They're all producing flakes of wax, chewing it up and passing it up the line. So the one at the top's attaching it, and that's how they build their comb. And that's why it's all built straight down. It's a plumb line. So with foundation that we provide, they're just building out. So, but in nature, they're hanging from each other and they're building it. So again, in day 12 and beyond, you know, they're taking on guard duty. They're responsible for heating and cooling the hive. You know, you'll see a lot of hives in the heat here in Arkansas. You know, it's 100-something degrees. They're out on front. They're fanning their wings. They're taking water, collecting water and bringing it into the hive and fanning their wings to create an evaporative environment. So they're going to keep that brood that's in that hive at about 97 degrees, whether it's 60 outside or whether it's 105 outside. They're going to manage that temperature to that optimal temperature and keep those covered. The next 2 weeks, and again, after about day 12, it kind of depends on what the needs of the hive are. You know, if it's not really needed for heating and cooling and there's plenty of guard, you know, they may they may move immediately to converting nectar to honey and storing honey and pollen. So the way that works is the worker bees, the foragers, bring back the nectar in their honey sac, and they transfer that through the mouth to, you know, one of these house bees, who then mixes it in their gut with some enzymes, and they deposit that into cells. And then they're fanning that to evaporate it. And once that nectar mixed with those enzymes gets to a certain moisture content that they're happy with, then and only then will they cap it off. So depending on time of year, it may stay in those cells a very short period of time and then get capped sometimes. You know, it depends on humidity, depends on other things that are going on. But as soon as, but they'll leave it open, fanning it until it gets to the moisture content that they want. Once they've graduated from that, then they become field bees. Now they're the ones out and about, using their pollen sacs here on their legs to collect pollen, and using their specialized tongues for nectar. You know, they've got a very long tongue, but not as long as, say, a hummingbird or some other insects. You know, they don't, people say honeysuckle. Well, honeysuckle is too, you know, the nectar is too deep in a honeysuckle for a honeybee. Their tongues aren't quite that long. They're specialized for various types of flowers. But they're collecting nectar, pollen, water, as I mentioned, and propolis. Propolis is a very important substance. It's made from various plant saps. Could be tree saps, could be, that's what they're coating the interior of the hive with, and they're filling all the cracks. They're using it like caulk. That's why you see, it's why we can get away with beehives, just boxes stacked on top of each other, because the bees are going to immediately caulk every crack in there and reduce the drafts, and they're going to stick those things together. And that's why you see us out there, a beekeeper out there with a little pry bar, prying apart all those boxes, because the bees have glued it all together with propolis. And propolis can vary from kind of a really thick paste, I mean like a really thick paste, to almost rock hard, depending on the time of year. So depends on what plants the bees are sourcing their propolis from. But it's also very antibacterial, so that's how they keep the interior of the hive envelope itself free of pathogens, or at least attempt to keep it free of pathogens. There's basically any flat surface inside the hive, they're also going to coat that as well. So when you get a nice new box for your bees, you see that nice white pine wood. Well, in a year or two, it's not going to be, it's going to have kind of a yellow sheen to it. It's because they've propolized not only the edges and all the cracks, but also the flat surfaces as well. Queen and drone development, I do want to highlight, this is a queen cell, which looks like kind of a popcorn protruding from the side of a frame. Looks very different than, this would be more akin to normal worker cell. And these over here, They almost look like they're popped out of the foundation or from the honeycomb. Those are drone cells. The drones are bigger, so they need a slightly bigger cell, and then you're going to see those protruding from the edge of the frame. So they look quite a bit different, but again, they're 10 to 15% of your hive in theory. We'll talk a little bit more about the queens here in just a minute, but it's peanut-like. They're only fed royal jelly. They fully develop in 16 days. Their first job when they hatch is to dispatch any competition. So a hive may have left behind 4 or 5 queen cells, or they may have 4 or 5 supersedure cells within there, raising in new queens. Well, the first one that emerges, what she's going to do, the queen does have a stinger. The drone does not. A worker definitely has a stinger. The queen has a stinger, but the only thing she uses it for is to go kill other queens. So she will go find any and all other queens in that hive and kill them before they emerge. And if she doesn't get them all before they emerge, there's going to be a fight, typically. It's very rare that you'll find a hive with 2 queens in it. They just don't get along. But job 2 is to get mated. You know, once she emerges, you've got a virgin queen. In a couple days, she's ready to start taking, is it days? Somebody help me. Is it a week? Guys? We're going to go with days. But she's going to go, it's very fascinating. Now I'm going to jump out and talk about this class. I hope I'm inspiring you to go learn more. This is one of those things. It's a bit of a mystery to science. Some people tell you they think they know. Where do the queens go? The queens go and they hang out in a general geographic region. We really don't understand that part of it. How do they know to go to that particular area looking for drones? Is it like there's no neon sign saying, hey, singles here? You know, there's not, you know, how do they know? They do. They'll go to a, quote, congregating area typically, and that's where they'll find other drones. That's where the drones will be hanging out. That's where they'll go hang out. But they'll mate with, you know, a number of different drones in that single mating flight. And that's the only time she'll mate her entire life. She'll store that semen and sperm, and that's all she's going to get for the rest of her life. So we talked about she's laying 1,000 to 2,000 eggs a day. Laying workers, those are fertilized eggs, so she's deciding when she lays an egg whether she's going to fertilize that egg or not. If she fertilizes it, you got a worker. If she doesn't fertilize it, you got a drone. So again, she's only doing that once, and she's storing that in a special organ in her abdomen. Drones, oversized cells, and all we talked about, they only got one job. But it's important to know you've got a lot of worker cells in your hive, but you'll also have a percentage of these larger looking ones, and also these as well. I'm going to get on this other side. Queen development. You'll find multiple queen cells in a healthy hive. A hive will often have what we call emergency cells. They'll just build these to have them around. So if by chance they need a queen, all of a sudden, they'll go find an egg or a larva of the right age, and they'll transfer that to the queen cell and start feeding her royal jelly from that point and raise their own queen. So you'll typically see these in your hive all the time. But in general, we have what we call swarm cells at the bottom of the frame. So typically beekeepers, we'd probably call these swarm cells. And then supersedure cells, which are more like the picture I showed you before, which are sticking out from the frame. Why is that important? Well, we'll talk about later about trying to minimize swarming as a beekeeper. That's one of the things people like to do. So if all of those are swarm cells along the bottom, then I'll just cut all those out and the hive won't swarm. If only it was that easy. Different opinions about that, different theories about that. A lot of people do. They'll go in and just cut them out. But the risk you run is you cut out all the queen cells in your hive to prevent them from swarming, and then what if they do need a queen? And you don't notice, or you're not prepared to provide them with a new queen. quickly. So again, the more you know, the better able you are to work with the bees and help them do what they want to do and get them to do what you want them to do. I think that's all we have time for. Also very important is to understand the population in your hive. The red one really kind of is what you care about. The population of a hive is going to start, in the winter, it's going to be very low. And they're going to start ramping up here in the early spring. And they're really going to peak, right here early summer to coincide with the nectar flow. That's when all the flowers are blooming. That's when things are going. And they want to be able to take advantage of that. Now, you as a beekeeper are thinking, I really want my population to be booming here in June. So based on what I know, it takes 21 days to make a bee. And what do I need to be doing back here to help those bees get to that maximum population come midsummer? Again, there's an art and there's a science. You start feeding sugar water here in the spring to really stimulate them to start brooding, but what if you do that too soon, now all of a sudden you got this booming population and then there's no nectar for them to, you missed, you got your timing off. You kind of missed it. So now you got a bunch of bees that you either need to feed or they're going to starve to death before the actual flow gets here. So again, there's art and there's science. If you're going to do stimulative feeding to try and maximize your honey production this year, then be sure you know what you're doing, okay? That's my message. Don't just start feeding sugar, one-to-one sugar water here in February because somebody told you should be. Make sure you understand why you're doing anything actually in the hive, but make sure you understand what the implications of that are. Make sense? Okay, can't tell. Okay, I'm gonna, hive communication. Bees have got to communicate within the hive. Obviously, it's a superorganism, there's a lot going on. How do they do it? Bees need to communicate to identify the colony, because you see them stacked up in a bee yard. There's 10 of them, they're all white, they all look the same. How do you figure out which is which? They need to communicate the needs of the colony, danger to the colony. Where's resources? How do I locate those? There's two primary modes of communication going on within the hive. There's pheromones, or smell. That's how most of it happens. We talked a little bit about the queen pheromone. But there's also the communications dance, the waggle dance, we call it, which is pretty amazing to look at. People have studied that pretty carefully. It's worth going down the rabbit hole if you find some time you want to spend understanding bee communication. Just know that the waggle dance, if you open up a hive and you pull up some frames, odds are, maybe not every time, but usually you'll see a bee in there trying to communicate to the other bees. Here's where it is, here's what it, they'll taste, again, the forager came in and passed that nectar to a house bee, okay? And he went and told all his buddies where it is. So here's the distance, here's the direction relative to the sun, here's what it is, here's what it tastes like, so that's how they're communicating within the hive. You'll notice here, the bees are just kind of around feeling it. Again, this is in a dark hole, so they can't actually see the other bee, but they can feel the vibrations and see the motion, or feel the motion of the bee. Queen pheromones, we talked about identity and stabilization. Oh, I put lemongrass up there because the queen pheromones to bees, chemically, is very close to a lemongrass extract. So if you're using lemongrass, beekeepers will use lemongrass as an attractant sometimes to attract bees for various reasons. Just know I was, watch my time, I won't tell too many stories. An acquaintance was having a problem with bees in her house, and she was leaving the door open. She said, they always had 20 bees in her. I said, that's a lot for where she lived. Well, she was burning lemongrass scented candles. She really liked the smell of lemongrass. And I'm like, yeah, that'll do it. Because all the bees in the area will come and say, hey, it smells pretty good. What's going on? the queen pheromone that you're replicating. Stimulates brood rearing within the hive, attracts drones, helps control, swarming. And as I said, that pheromone, as she ages, that pheromone can become diminished. It's not as strong as it used to be. And that's where the colony may decide she's not doing good enough. It's not just that she's not laying enough eggs, it may be that she doesn't smell right anymore, or it's not strong enough to permeate the entire hive. So they'll replace her as well. The worker pheromones, this gives me a chance to talk about the stingers, but they use it for orientation. They'll be on the front of a new hive especially. You'll see them with their abdomens in the air, fanning their wings, or telling their buddies, hey, this is a good spot. This is home, come on over. They're spreading their pheromones that way as well. The alarm pheromone, again, I put bananas up there because the alarm pheromone smells a lot like bananas. Banana extract. So I've heard people say don't walk up to a hive eating a banana, but I don't know. I don't usually eat when I approach a hive anyway, but it does absolutely smell like bananas. That I can attest to because I've aggravated a large swarm of bees multiple times, and sure enough, you get a nice strong whiff of the banana smell. But the sting gland is how they produce that, and when this stinger, it's kind of a cross-section one. It's barbed, so it's going to stay in you. But it's also, what you can't see from this, there's two sections to it. And it kind of works its way into your skin. It all happens pretty quick, but they're working those barbs, and they're working that in. And when the bee when this part, the sac, the venom sac, is still attached most of the time, this bee's going to die, by the way. And this bee knows that. They don't want to sting you. FYI, they know they're going to die, but they do it in defense of their colony or themselves. So, do they know they're going to die? Here I am attributing characteristics to them, but they're going to leave that stinger and that sac behind, and that's why you always hear beekeepers tell you, to scrape that stinger off and don't pinch it and pull it out, because when you pinch it, you're pinching the venom sac, and you're just injecting yourself with venom. So it was bad before, and then you just made it worse when you pinched it. So just get you a credit card or a hive tool or anything sharp and just scrape it off. But again, worker bees definitely use, and the other thing they're doing is they're tagging you. They're gonna leave a bit of that pheromone behind on your skin from that sac and from that stinger. So all the other bees know who the bad guy is. That's you. So know that. You'll see us beekeepers, you get stung once, you might scrape it off, but give it a puff of smoke, wipe it off, do something, because you've been marked. So other bees are going to know that you're not a friendly. Trail pheromone, they can leave that pheromone in the air as they're traveling as well. Brood pheromones, there are others as well, but I won't go any farther than that. Swarming. It's instinctive. That's how a hive reproduces. We talk about a hive, we talk about queen reproduction, drones, workers, everything else, but the hive itself, the way the hive reproduces is it casts off a swarm. What happens is the old queen and about half the workers take off to establish a new hive. They do that when things are going well, obviously. When things are looking good in the hive, you as a beekeeper and the bees, everything's, there's plenty of brood, there's plenty of food, everything's going good. They'll start raising a couple queens, they'll leave some queen cells behind, and the queen and half the workers take off. Obviously not good for the beekeeper. They tend to swarm at the beginning of the nectar flow, so again, early in the year, gives them time to go establish a new colony, build that colony up, and survive the upcoming winter. It doesn't mean you won't get swarms late summer and early fall. It happens. It's just a lot more rare. Where we see most of them is in the early spring. And minimizing swarming is important both to the beekeeper, to your honey production, but also sometimes to your neighbors as well. You'll see this swarm is sitting at the bottom of a swing set, and there's a couple of us that chase swarms around this area. So if someone calls and people get excited about a swarm. What a swarm is the queen and half the bees. This is called a waypoint. What they do is they leave the hive. The queen goes off, finds a spot to perch. The bees go with her, form a protective ball to protect her from predators and other things. Scout bees then go out and find a home. So this is just a waypoint for while they're waiting till the scout bees have find a new hive location, and then they'll all take off and go. So again, but people really don't like these things in their backyard or on their fence or in their hammock or wherever they might show up. So, people can get excited. And if you're the beekeeper in the neighborhood, they're going to call you and say, hey, your bees are over here in my yard. Will you please come get them? And you'll go, So understanding how bees work will help you learn to work with them is the main point. What I tried to give you is just a taste. So again, there's a lot more to learn about bee biology. It is fascinating, and bee behavior. There's a book called Bee Democracy. Is that the title of it? Honeybee Democracy, thank you. Honeybee Democracy, which is all about the swarming instinct and how they actually select a new hive. Fascinating behavior. There's a whole lot of evolution at work there, and it is a bit of a democracy, so the way they're doing that. We're going to take a quick break. If we could, keep it down to about 5 minutes, and then we'll restart with Earl on various hive components and tools at 6:30. Oh yeah, still snacks at the back, so please help yourselves. Thank you.
You've now had the two professionals come in and talk to you, and they saved the worker to come in and do this part of the presentation, the amateur or whatever. But anyhow, I get to tell you about the hive. And before I start, I want you to remember, for all you new beekeepers, if you ask 10 beekeepers for an opinion, you'll get 13. And that, I mean, it just works that way. And I'm not saying they're wrong, because in different instances, there's a different answer. And beekeepers are very opinionated, strong-willed, but they're very dependable, and they want to help others. And you all are going to become beekeepers. So remember, those are the traits that you're going to exhibit. I get to talk about hives. And if you want to, you can paint your hives. Make them look beautiful. And then, of course, what happens is as you break them down and move them and repair parts, and all those colors will intermingle. You know, it will not stay like that. One of the greatest things you can do if you have kids, let your kids paint your hives, because then they have ownership in them too. Beekeepers are stubbornly independent. You filter what you said and decide for yourselves what is right for you. That's a gentleman that is considered the father of modern beekeeping. He invented this hive that we have in front of us. And there are lots of different hives, and there have been different hives throughout the history of beekeeping. The problem is, if the old hives, when you took them apart, you killed all the bees. That was just naturally, like the old wooden log or the skep hives, or you destroyed the bees. And to be a legal beekeeper in the state of Arkansas, you have to be able to pull your insects out, and for that to be observed and to be able to put it back together. So he came up with a way of being able to do that, and he came up with the concept of bee space. How much space can you leave for the bees to travel through the hives and do what they need to do? If you give them too much space, they fill it. If you don't give them enough space, they can't do what they need to do. He came up with the idea of bee space, which is around 3/8 of an inch. Now that would almost scare me if I was a new beekeeper. Has all those different parts. If you look over there on the left, I even included a bunch of vocabulary words for you. You don't have to know all that. You will learn it as you go through, especially this class is timed well. You have to be prepared to be a beekeeper when? Next spring, when the bees come in. Does that make sense? Right now, everybody, what beekeepers do during the winter, they repair their equipment. They put in they put foundation in frames, they paint their boxes, they do all those things, getting ready for next year. So you have timed it perfectly. You have all winter to learn how to become beekeepers. I'm going to go through, you can see I have a hive up here. One of the things that really got me, do you see that word super up there? I didn't understand what a super was for the first couple of years, because it's really just a box, just like this one here. What makes it a super is this is your hive body down here. This is where the queen and the bees lay their brood and have pollen and all that. And then you stack some boxes up on top, and that's where you're going to collect your honey from. Those are supers up here. Even if I took a big box like this and I put it up on top of all the other boxes, it would be a super up here, but it's your hive body down here. There's not going to be a quiz over these, okay? Hive stands come in a variety, all shapes, sizes, materials. They can be concrete blocks. They can be metal posts up on steps with ant protections. It's really up to you. What you decide you want to have and what you want to work with and how much money you want to spend, to get to where you're going to go. Bottom boards is like everything, there are different kinds. This is what we call a solid bottom board. You see how it's just a board at the bottom for them to sit on? Or you could have one of these that has a screen that takes up all the middle of it here. It's a personal choice. If you're a commercial beekeeper like those that do pollination, you'll only have solid bottom boards because they don't want them falling apart. They want to get there. They make it as easy to replace everything as they can. The screen bottom boards has some advantages. Let's see if let me back up here. The screen bottom board has the advantage of ventilation. When it gets so hot in the summer, can you imagine having a screen door instead of having a door that shuts? And it also allows one of the worst pests affecting bees right now called varroa. If they drop off the bee and they drop to the bottom where you have a board, they just climb on the next bee going up above. If you have a screen, they fall through, and it's like falling in the Grand Canyon. They can't ever get back up to the beehive again. As I said, the bottom two boxes, or could be the bottom one box. Depends on, when you start, you only have one box, and that may be as big as your hive gets that first year. This is your brood chamber. It says hopefully where your queen lives, because as you come up and you have your supers put on where you're hoping to be full of honey, if your queen decides to go up and lay eggs in there, then it creates problems when you're trying to extract honey. You have to work around her eggs and all the stuff that goes with it. But the brood box, this is the home for the bees. Boxes come in different sizes. They go shallow, they go medium, they go deep. This is a deep box here. And this is a deep box that holds 10 frames, and this is what you call a frame. So there would be 10 of these inside of here. It is 9 5/8 inches tall. They're all the same width and length. They differ in width. The mediums are 6 5/8. The shallows are 5 11/16. When you get to be my age, you start going away from these deep boxes, because a deep box, I see you shaking your head here. A deep box, 10 frame deep box full of honey can weigh between 80 and 100 pounds. And you're holding it like this, or you're lifting, and you gotta remember it's got bees in it too and all that, and you lift it up and you twist, which is not a good thing for your back a lot of times. And so actually I have gone from deep boxes that are 10 frames to medium boxes that are 8 frame. You just need more of them. But it helps you considerably on the amount of weight that you're moving. You will not see this in Arkansas. I think I can say that. Basically because we don't have the row crop production. We don't have places where a season that will allow our bees to produce that many supers. Ours are typically above the 2 deep boxes. You may have 2, 3, 4 boxes above that. If you got 4 above that, you're having a heck of a year. If you got 5 or 6, you're setting the record for the club. You know, but that's what supers are. Those are the different ones above. Let me see if I can. What's this called right here? The hive body. Yeah, where everything's at. This is called a queen excluder. Some people also call it a honey excluder. It can be made out of metal, It can be made out of bamboo. It can be made out of plastic. And what it's designed for is the queen's body can't fit between that. So you have your 2 deep boxes, and you place this over it, and then you put your supers on top of it, and where should the queen reside? Down in the bottom. It's a wonderful thing, you know, that, but also you have a little problem. You're asking your bees with their bodies full of nectar, big, expanded, to squeeze up through this to put their honey up above. And you learn ways to trick them. One of the ways to trick them is you put boxes with nectar above that. Then they have to go through and take care of the nectar anyhow, so that draws them up into those boxes. But if you just put empty boxes up above them, a lot of times the queen excluder will exclude them from going on up. Inner cover. Did you hear him talk about propolis a minute ago? Propolis, he called it caulk. I'm going to call it glue. It really is. In fact, when you pop it open, it cracks. You can hear it actually crack when you're, and if you did not have an inner cover, which is what this is, in between your boxes and your top, guess what happens if you just put a top on? They glue it down. And you're out there doing this to the box, and what are the bees doing inside? Because you're shaking everything around. So this is a neat device, and you can use it later for lots of things. So you can use to put your feed on in the wintertime. If you just put sugar out on this, you can actually put a bucket in here with little holes in the bottom and put another box on top of it, and it can feed your bees in the wintertime that way. It's a handy thing to have. Okay, this is an outer cover, and it's got the weatherproofing top on it. It goes over that. It's pretty heavy, unless you get the plastic ones, which can blow away and things, but it's pretty heavy, although what do you typically see in beehives that have tops like this? Have you all seen them? Some people put rocks on them, bricks on them, something like that, because you have a 50-mile-an-hour wind go through like we had the other night. You might worry about whether they're going to lose their top or not. They also have migratory tops, and all that is just what it looks like. A piece of plywood or wood with 2 sides on it that just sits over the top of the hive. I have gone exclusively to the migratory, but you could talk to other gentlemen in here or beekeepers in here, and they will tell you they only use, ask 10 beekeepers, you get 13 opinions type thing. So commercial beekeepers use the migratory ones because you can stack on them. You can put them on pallets. Have you seen it like when a truck turns over and you got 10 million bees someplace? But that's how they move bees, but you can simply just stack them one on top of another, bungee it all together, and you're good to go. Frames, and this is a frame. And it's made up of different parts. I'm a woodworker. I make almost everything in my beehives out of scrap lumber. If you know somebody that has access to one-buy material, beekeeping is cheap. Because you can make the boxes, you can make the stands, you can make the bases, you can make the tops, all of it's one-buy material. And there's even some sites where you can get free plans on how to do it. But frames, I don't make. Because if you notice, there's about 10 different cuts on each one, which means you have to change your table saw, you change your material and make all this. So, and these cost you about $1.50 a piece, not counting the foundation, but the wood parts all around it cost you about $1.50 a piece. And when you get into beekeeping, you're going to make a bunch of these. You're going to sit down and put them together, and and it's just part of beekeeping. If you decide to go with the smaller boxes, you're going to make more. Remember, the typical hive here in Arkansas has 2 deep body. If you're going to use a medium boxes, you're going to use 3 mediums is the same as 2 deeps. But that also means you made 10 more frames or 8 more frames. Okay, so anyhow, you're going to do a lot of time putting these frames together. You have plastic foundation, which is what this is. I don't know if you all can see, it's just plastic. It's got the hexagonal images printed on or made into it so they can go from there. Or you can have a beeswax foundation. This is one of beeswax foundation after it's been drawn out by the bees. Can you see through it? I don't know if can you see the light coming through? So that's after the bees have pulled it out. It's very thin. Which do you think the bees prefer? Very definitely. And if you don't put wax on these, and a lot of times you buy them and they come without wax on them, the bees are not really interested in these. It's just a hunk of plastic in there. If you want them to be happy with you, you will paint on beeswax on these, or you can buy them, what they call them dipped or double dipped or triple dipped, you know, to give the bees materials to work with. Because if you don't give them any beeswax to work with, what do they have to do? They have to make it for all these. And they will actually, if you've got some of these in your hive, they will strip these down to add wax to make those. You know, it's one of those that. So anyhow, there's your 2 choices. If you get the beeswax material, I'm probably getting ahead of myself. I don't know if you can see, you can't see. There are wires in this wax that hold it together. That's very important when you extract it and you've got it and you're using centrifugal force and you're spinning it. If you don't have anything holding it together, it falls apart. With wax, there's no falling apart. There's no, it's a preference on what. Now, you would think that that I would be this type of person, and I have been. But lately, because you have to buy them, if things go wrong or wax moths get in them, eat them up or whatever, you end up replacing them. With these, I got this thing called a pressure washer. I put wax on it, and I'm ready to go again, you know. So and also, they make these in different colors of plastic. It can be white, or it can be black, or it can be yellow. If it's black, you remember those little white eggs that you're looking for? They show up really good on black. Now, if you buy a white or yellow, you're going to have a little bit more trouble with them. But it's easier to find your eggs on the black plastic foundation. That's how you wire them. If you use wax foundation, you can wire them. You can also use little pins, like I've got down here at the bottom, which you shove through the hole and it goes into the sides of the foundation to hold it in place. I'm lazy, so I use the pins. That's also how you hold the wax foundation in place unless it's already where it goes all the way out to the sides. Where do you get your hives? Online sources abound. If you ever get on a catalog list, you will get catalogs every year. Usually 2 or 3 from different companies. They'll just kind of flood you with them. And there's some people, Man Lakes, Dedant, Better Bee, Pigeon Mountain, Kelly, and they do go out of business and other companies come on, so they change in and out over time. Or you can build them themselves if you're a basic skills woodworker. There's an online source called beesource.com. That's the online source I was telling you that has all the plans for free. beesource.com. They also have discussion groups. So if you want to hear a lot of beekeepers with opinions express them, you get on there and you'll see they go in depth. But they're great. If you're having a problem and you want to hear, you'll get about 30 different opinions on how to solve that problem. Assembling your hive. When assembling your hive, use good water-resistant exterior grade glue. on all surface-to-surface points in a joint. Check to make sure the boxes are square as you build them. The same with your frames. Have you all seen the little plastic squares that it's your best friend when you're making boxes and you're making frames. Just have one of those, check it on every frame and every box that you make. Use nails and screws to hold them together, and typically people don't so much anymore. You ever seen those little brad nailers that you go dip, dip, dip? You can take care and you can take a hammer. They send you this great little sack of nails to nail it together with, but they're real short, and or you can just take your brad nailer and just go to town on them. And of course, screws are much better than nails because you can take it apart if you make a mistake. And they typically hold much better over time. The joints at the top and the bottom have a tendency to fail. We're talking about these joints up here and here because you're taking your hive tool and you're jamming it in there and you're shoving it up. So you're putting a lot of stress on your corners. So you need to put in an extra nail or extra screw at the top and bottom just to hold them together, give them protection. Now's a good time to paint them also. Use an exterior paint. Apply several coats, especially to the end grain in the joint. End grain soaks up paint. It will also soak up water if you don't paint them and rot out quickly. This is your best time to paint them. After this, they're going to have bees in them. So this is really the chance that you have to really put on. So put on 2 or 3 or 4 coats of paint until it really looks like it's sealed. The bees don't care about the color. They really don't. They don't care what color their hives are. So it's all about you. Now, most beehives are white. Why is that? Keep them cooler. If it's 100 degrees outside and you've got a dark colored hive, you just added 15, 20, 30 degrees to the inside of that hive. I like pastels. You can put all kinds of light pastel colors, and all that. I'm not saying don't use black or dark colors. I'm just saying you're making your hive much hotter in the summertime, and they get hot enough as it is. You can get great paint at the Oops part of your paint store. That's not so true anymore. It was up until about last year. You could go in there and the mistakes they make, you could get it really cheap, good, but they're charging more for it now. I've been trying. I go in and my wife can verify. I'll go in and check to see what paint is available on the Oops side, and I look at that and say, I'm not paying $25 for that, or whatever. But it's up to you. Sometimes I'll even make it close to your color if you want to. By the way, should you paint the inside of your hive? Please don't. They're going to propolize it anyhow. So leave the inside of your hive to the bees. No, I hit that again. I don't know if I'm going to add this part. Let me back up a little bit too. When you're putting your hives together, if you buy a hive with these little handholds in it, when you're gluing it together, make sure they're on the outside. Okay, we all laugh. Most of the things I'm talking about is from experience, but make sure they're on the outside when you put them there. Okay, tools of the hive. A smoker. And that's this little gadget right here. And everybody that's ever seen beekeeping has seen somebody with a smoker. Bees communicate by pheromones, and you've heard us talking about that, right? In fact, they do much more by pheromones than they do by sight. Smoke from your smoker interferes with their ability to smell. So it helps you, when they're getting ready to attack you by multitudes and they're really mad at you, some smoke goes a long ways. Now, when I say that, when you're going to go into your hive, you smoke them, but you don't kill them. You don't fill up the hive with smoke so they can't breathe, and you lightly smoke them. But there are times when my bees are getting excited, and believe it or not, keeping one of these going is very difficult. Okay, I look at this couple right here because they're first-year beekeepers. They're ending their first year. And as I'm talking through here, I get to watch them go. Been there, done that. And invariably, this will quit smoking at the time the bees are getting really excited. You know, and you're sitting there puff, puff, puffing, hoping that it will light up, and they're not, so you have to get away from there. Typically, because I have to take my glove off to use my lighter to get it started, so I can't do it right there at the... Anyhow, all kinds of organic material can be used in the smoker. Pine needles, sumac heads, burlap, hay, cotton t-shirt, not with any plastic in it, etc. Oak leaves, cardboard are not good. Do yourself a favor. You want free material. Get yourself a 5-gallon bucket. When it's dry, go out and fill it up, cram it full of pine needles. How much did that cost you? It's good for a year. You've got your smoker fuel for the next year. Put it in a dry spot so it doesn't get rained on and stuff, but that's a good way. A smoker with a cage, you can see the cage around this one, helps protect you and the smoker from damage. The hook is really handy to hang off a fence or hang off whatever you've got around your, and I add one more thing. I have a metal bucket that I put this in because I have to go from hive to hive. If you put it in a plastic bucket, it's going to melt. If you want to have a good time, go down the road and have people tell you your truck is on fire because you've got a smoker in the back, you know, in a metal bucket, and it looks. But there was an article in the Beekeeper magazine about 2 months ago that said I set my truck on fire, you know, and it does happen. How to light a smoker. Take out some of your fuel. In this case, I'm going to call it pine needles. You open this up. By the way, this is a cheap smoker. You can buy very expensive smokers. You can buy copper smokers. You can buy beautiful smokers. You can buy them that are much deeper than this, and then they'll burn a lot longer. This is typically what you start with. It has, I'll show you, this little thing in the bottom, and it has little legs on it. I haven't pushed it out. This is brand new. It has little legs on it. You drop it down the bottom, and that gives a little air space for this bellows to push through underneath, to come up underneath the material that you have in there. So you put in, I'll usually light some pine needles, put them down in there, give it a couple puffs, get it going. Put in some more material, get it going. Put in some more material, get it going. Cram it full, not where it'll put out the fire, but cram it so that it has lots in there. Put this on, and as I'm working every little bit, I'll reach over and give it a couple of puffs, and it keeps it going. When it gets to the part where you got embers coming out the end, you need to put in more fuel. You don't need to put fire inside of your beehive. That doesn't help calm the bees down, you know, or anything. And it's not helping. It's really hot. It's like having a fire inside of their hive. Hive tool, you cannot, and let me say, you cannot work the hive without a hive tool. If you go down there without it, it's glued together. You can say, oh, I bet I can pop it apart. No, they glue this thing. Yes, you can, but the bees will be so mad at you by the time you get the lid off of it that you'll be done working. And do not, I heard somebody say pry bar. Do not use a pry bar. It's bigger. It does damage to your hive as you're working it. These things are cheap. Just get you, but don't get one. Remember, I told you have to have it to work your bees? What will happen if you have one? You'll lose it. It's automatic. You should have at least two and paint them with bright colors, fluorescent green, whatever, so that you can see it. White is not bad. Do not use a pry bar. It's used to open the hive, and in my case, because I have the top that just sits down on there, I can just slide mine in here and pop it. But these frames get glued down so hard, And you always, I say this, and somebody will say, well, you really don't. I start with the second frame from either end to raise up, because most of the bee business with the queen is happening here in the middle of your hive. The one thing you don't want to do when you pull out your first frame is roll the queen. It's crammed in there side by side, and you pull that thing out. There's fewer bees the farther away you get from the middle. You go over to the second frame, you pull it out. I'll lay it down here, which is what you do if you don't have one of the little tools I'm going to tell you about. Then you just pop them toward the empty hole. That make sense? And then when you put them all together, you put them back exactly the way the bees had them, unless you have a really good reason for doing something different. Why is that? The bees put this together. They've got it all organized the way they want. They really don't want you to take their food from here and put it over here, and they don't want you to take the pollen from here and put, you know what I'm saying? So unless you have a really good reason, simply put it back together the way that you took it apart. Also, burr comb, for those of you that don't know, this doesn't have any, but the bees will put a bunch of wax up on top of these. Remember to glue the top down or whatever? Well, you can just very simply, while you're here, just take the end of this and scrape it off, put it in a bag. Remember, you need beeswax. This is free beeswax. You just take it off, put it in a bag, helps you open the top next time. So one of the reasons you have this thing, and it's sharp on the end, it just allows you to remove that burr comb. Also, your top will have it on there. Scrape it off, put it in a bag, you'll use it later. You have these things called small hive beetles. If you want to see excitement, take your hive apart, you've got small hive beetles, you use this thing and you're going, you're squashing all them small hive beetles in your hive there. So this has a variety of uses. And when I go to my hives, I have to have my suit. I really don't. For feeding, I don't even have to have my suit, but I have to have my hive tool. That's the one tool I have to have. Then you have tools that can help but are not always necessary. You can have a bee brush. It's made out of horsehair. 5 minutes. You can have and it's not a paintbrush. It's real light, and you can just gently push the bees away. You can gently bring them up and over. It's a really handy thing to have. You can have a frame grip, which is this tool here, and you use it to grab your frames out, and it looks like it's a wonderful deal, but if you ever relax your grip, what happens to your frame full of bees? And where do they all come to visit? And then you've got the rest of the bees excited too. You could have a frame perch. Which is very simply, you can put 2 or 3 frames out there. It opens things up for you. My problem is, if I take these other tools, I end up having to go back to the last hive because I left 1 or 2 of them behind. Now, you all are probably, that would never happen to you, but I have to have this. Protective gear, minimum for most beekeepers is a veil. It protects your head, face, and eyes. It's easy to put on and take off. It should keep the bees from coming underneath. By the way, if you're a beekeeper and you see the back of the bee inside your hive, or inside your veil, you're in trouble. It's a simple solution because that means they're inside of there with you. You see their belly when they're on the outside and you're looking out, but you see the back if they're on the inside. And it's light and cool. Jacket and veil, which is what I use, provides a great layer of protection. Jacket sleeves will have loops. I didn't know this for years. They have these little things on them. That's to put your thumb through them so that when you're pulling on your gloves, your sleeve doesn't come up and leave it exposed, and you find out after the bees find out. So really use those little loops that they have. They can get hot. All bee equipment can get really hot in the summertime. You must remember to zip. This thing here has a zip that goes up here, a zip that comes this way, a zip that comes this way. Several times I've been out working the bees. I'm fearless. I've got my equipment on. And then I noticed that I forgot to zip to pull this one over. And then I show my true colors and run, you know, and zip there until you got several different hood choices. It can go over like this, or you can have a full round one. That's a personal choice. They've got men, women, and child sizes. The one thing I would suggest is you want it big. You don't want anything pulling up tight on your skin for them to sting you through. That is a 2XL, you know, that's a. You can have a full coveralls, and this is when I was a beginning beekeeper, this is what I wanted, to be protected. And remember to zip, but it is the hottest in the summer. It can be somewhat confining, but it is available in all sizes. It's all a personal choice. Most start out with that, and then they get a jacket and a veil after that. Boots, or pulling socks up over jeans. Bees climb up your socks and up your legs. Bees will sting your ankles. Boots are good protection. Stuff in your jeans. Pulling socks up over your jeans will help. Duct tape around there also works. And if you want a weird sensation, when you feel a bee climbing up the inside of your leg, you have a decision to make. Where do you want to get stung? Because it's going to sting. You know, you can let it keep on coming. You just have to make the choice. Gloves are sting resistant, not sting proof. You can get stung through leather gloves. Gloves cause a loss of touch when working bees. More experienced beekeepers have a tendency not to use gloves or use latex gloves or nitrile gloves, and gloves become a personal choice with experience. Some use nitrile or latex to keep their hands clean. And that, I'm completed. I think I got down in my time limit. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your excellent practical presentation.
Now, there's a magazine that comes out, and it's on a professional level. You know what I'm saying? And I think, I read these things. About half of it on my own. On Wednesdays. We have some really good people, very knowledgeable people, and we like to share our knowledge. You're going to see it tonight, and then, that's and we do have a apprenticeship and a mentoring program, which also includes video. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the next 10-15 minutes, you will need to listen to Dutch English. Okay, but it's only 10-15 minutes. And we're going to talk about hive placements. But first, a few comments that are important. So the honeybees gather nectar in around 300 flowers. We have thousands of flowers in trees, in bushes, and plants. Okay, but the 300 are the main plants that give nectar, pollen, to our bees. So if you plan to start with bees and you want to have plants, trees in your garden, okay, do some investigation. And of course, in our bee club, we have a lot of information what works very well in Northwest Arkansas. A bee colony needs protein, pollen, coming from the male part of the flowers, energy, nectar, from the base of the female flower, and a good water source for reproduction, food storage, and survival. Many new synthetic flowers that you buy in Home Depot or Lowe's or Walmart or whatever do not produce pollen or nectar. Okay, be aware of that. Bees are flower stable, which means that we have wind pollination, we have self-pollination, and we have cross-pollination. Bees do cross-pollination, which is basically sexual reproduction. So the bees will concentrate on one type of flower, and when that flower is gone, they will move over to another type of flower, okay? So that you have really cross-pollination. Bees are insects and temperature determined, and they are most active between 60 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit with the wind speed below 15 miles per hour and on sunny days. So you will see with a lot of wind that they stay inside the hive. Now, you don't need to have a large garden to have a beehive. So normally in the middle you will have your bee garden, and bees will travel in a radius of around 2 miles around your bee hive or your bee garden. And they cover then 12.5 square miles. So they do in this circle a lot of work finding their resources, okay? And with their speed of 50 miles per hour, they can cover the 2 miles basically in 8 minutes. Beehive location. So one of the most important things to consider are local regulations, safety, sufficient food resources, and the position of the hives. And we will go through all 3 of them. First, are you allowed to have honeybees on your property? Okay. How many hives can you have on your property? Most big cities have certain regulations. I think here in Fayetteville they say 3 hives for a quarter of an acre. And then many cities say for every 2,500 square feet you can add another hive with a maximum of 4. But if you, of course, live outside the city limits, you can have as many as you want. Are your neighbors on board, especially within the city limits? And then with your neighbors are the many small children. I had a hive in Springdale, and I got suddenly with a friend of mine, where we registered the hive. He calls me and he says, your bees are too aggressive and they're stinging the kids. So you have to take your hive away. So also evaluate if anybody, especially in your neighbors, people are allergic. In the US, kids are 0.3, 0.5% allergic to bee stings, adults around 3%. And the older you get more sensitive. 12, 13 years ago when I started, my wife was not sensitive to bee stings. Now, if one stings her, she blows up, okay? So things can change. And then if you decide in the end, and I don't want to scare you, but you start with hives, you can register your hive at the plant board in Little Rock. Sufficient food resources. That is probably one of the most important items that you need to cover because you want to have nectar pollen access in spring, autumn, and in summer. So you don't want to start feeding your bees in the summer and in the autumn, okay? You want to cover those 3 areas. And you cover those areas if you have some land of some possibility to plant certain trees and plants. Neighborhoods with lots of flower gardens, especially in big cities. A lot of people plant flowers, irrigate the flowers, so bees have a constant source of natural resources. Other beekeepers in the close vicinity, we have in Northwest Arkansas and Benton County and Washington County around 750 registered beekeepers. And there are probably hundreds more that are not registered. So we have a lot of competition, especially in the cities. Rainfall during the year, you already heard, we don't have all of the year, especially in the summer and autumn, a lot of nectar flow. We have principally in the spring, but rainfall is extremely important for the flowers to have nectar. Most flowers have nectar in the early morning and in the late evening. There are several flowers that have it during the whole day, but basically the nectar that forms on the base of the female flower is a question of osmotic pressure between the water at root level and the flowers. Avoid overstocking hives, so don't put too many hives, especially when you start. We normally recommend to start with 2 hives. If you lose one, you can reproduce out the other one and keep going. This is the Evodia tree. This is a Korean tree that I plant in my property to have in the middle of the summer, yeah, a lot of nectar and pollen. There are male trees and female trees. It's not only for the honeybees. Every tree, yeah, is an amazing amount of different type of insects, yeah, that you support. Position of the hives, corner of the garden, not used a lot. You don't want to put bees in areas where people walk a lot because you get a conflict. Entrance facing towards the east to the south. When the early sun in the morning hits the hive, that's the best way. And then going to the middle of the day, having some cover. Raise the hives from the ground, you heard already, so that you don't have skunk or mice or raccoons visiting the hives and trying to get in. It's also easier when you work with the hives. You don't need to bend over as much. So try to figure out what is the ideal height so that you can work properly. Here you have some 2 nuke boxes with some feeders in the front, yeah, and then heavy weight on top against the wind. Along tree line, I prefer to have my hives. I have 20 hives along a tree line so that in the early morning they have sun and in the afternoon they have shade. Water resources in the area, very important. We think that the bees are only going for nectar and pollen, but as much nectar they are gather also water. You heard already that they need to have water to do evaporative cooling within the hive. Close to food resources. Again, I have a bee garden. If a plant is not producing pollen or nectar, it's out. Avoid damp areas. No, don't put your hives close to a lake or a pond or whatever. You want to have it pretty dry within the hive so that you avoid fungus diseases or other bacterial problems. Avoid theft and complaints. The investment in hives nowadays, 1 or 2 hives, you're talking at least $500. So be careful. I would say put them in a location out of sight, out of mind, so that people really are attracted to what you have. Protect from high winds in the cold, especially in the winter, yeah, and beware of predators. Don't put the purple martin house very close to your beehives because purple martins eat bees. Yeah, and for people outside the city limits, you need to be aware of bears nowadays, yeah, and start using electrical fences. So here you see one of the water sources that I use in my garden. In the middle of the summer, there are a lot of field bees that only travel 50 to 100 times a day to bring water resources back to the hive. And these bees put that water in their honey or nectar sac, okay, that contains around 25 to 40 milligrams of water. So if a hive consumes a quart of water, yeah, you will need to have around 36,000 flights of bees, yeah, to bring those reserves back into the hive. And of course, 36,000 bees, trips are also needed to get 1 quart of honey. That was it, what I have for hive location. Okay.
Thank you, Wynn. Just a quick comment. Earl earlier mentioned beesource.com. It's a great resource for any beekeeper, and I strongly encourage you to check it out. One thing to know about beekeepers, as Earl mentioned, you ask 10 beekeepers, you're gonna get 13 answers. The thing when you're in these forums like beesource.com, it's important to understand 2 things about the people you're listening to or communicating with. Where in the country are they located? Because what makes sense in Minnesota may not make any sense in Arkansas. Same thing for Florida. may not make any sense for here. So make sure you know kind of where they are. But also it's important to know, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning tonight, understand what your goals with beekeeping are. You know, is my goal to maximize honey production? Okay, well there's certain practices and things that I need to do during the course of the year to maximize my honey production. Now, if you're not supplementing your income with honey, then maybe, you know, you want to get some honey, yes, but okay, whether, you know, how much is enough is kind of, my cupboard's full of honey. If I never got any more honey, I think I'd probably die with some in the cupboard, but, so know what your goals are, because if you're not trying to maximize honey production, you're not necessarily, you know, what are you trying to do? And I always encourage new beekeepers, you're going to be really lucky if you got honey the first year, but what I encourage new beekeepers to approach is keep them alive for a year. Strive for that second year. But again, as you get deeper into beekeeping, certain equipment makes more sense depends on what your goals with beekeeping are. You know, Earl talked about 2 types of frames. There's other types of frames. There's foundationless frames where there's no wax foundation. You just let them build their own, which I mean, that's how I started out 15 some odd years ago, was foundationless and loved it. There's limitations too, though. I can't put those in an extractor. You know, you learn the hard way. First time you put it in, that doesn't work. So again, it's understanding, you know, I might get with foundationless frames slightly less of a honey production, but I'm doing it for other reasons. I'm not trying to maximize or help pay my mortgage. So again, encourage you to think about that as you learn more about beekeeping and as you listen to other people talk about what they do and don't do in their beekeeping practices. And when they tell you, I do X, ask them why. You should know, everybody, all us beekeepers, we're very opinionated, as Earl said. He's not kidding. I'll tell you why I use screen bottom board, but I'll also tell you why sometimes I don't. And and sometimes my answer may just be, I don't know, I'm trying something new this year. So, and that's acceptable as well. Experimentation and continuous learning is one of the things I like best about beekeeping. Real quick on hive locations that Wynn mentioned, in Fayetteville and Springdale, you typically don't have any problems, but if you're going to search for the specific regulations and really want to know, you're searching for city ordinances. So a Google search may not get it. You have to first search your city ordinances, and then it'll take you to a service or a government website, and then you can search beekeeping. Because if you just say, you know, beekeeping, Arkansas, you know, Springdale, Arkansas, you may not get any results. So just know that. I don't know of any that don't allow it. Now, HOAs are maybe a different issue, but beyond HOAs, and I know several people with 3 or 4 hives living in the Wilson Park area. So, I mean, there's a lot more, you know, people keeping bees, you know, in town than you might think. And I think you can have up to like 4 hives for it's either a quarter or half an acre lot in Fayetteville, which, anyway, seems like a lot, but encourage you to find out what the rules are. When it comes to neighbors, my experience has been a jar of honey goes a long way, so, and also invite the neighbors' kids over when you're extracting honey, and then all of a sudden it's kind of a thing. So, truth is, there's bees everywhere. Whether they're your bees or somebody else's bees, it'd be difficult for them to say it's really your bees. But you want to be a good neighbor, so when they call and say, hey, your bees are, you know, my neighbor who doesn't, he knows my hives are out in plain sight in my backyard, said, hey, I've got more than usual bees in my pool. Well, I provide a water source. They're going to find the nearest water source. So if it's somebody else's pool, that's where they're going to go. But in this case, he knew better. We've been there for years. He said, and so I went over there, and we took a look around. What it was his teenage boys and their friends were leaving a lot of Dr. Pepper and sugary drinks all spilled all over his deck. They weren't after his pool and the water. They were after the sugar water. So he learned to go out there and hose it off after the boys left, so there wasn't as much sugar water around. But again, just be aware that's going to happen. But And back to the old adage, you know, good fences make good neighbors. Maybe good privacy fences make good neighbors. So I keep my hives at my back porch with seating area, my wife and I and all our kids, and it's probably from here to that ice chest back there on the back table. I have a row of hives out there in that backyard. My wife mows the yard in our family, and she runs that mower right in front of those hives, all 3 hives, all summer long. And she's gotten stung 2 or 3 times, max. Now, usually it's because they fly under her hair and they can't get out, but 9 times out of 10, they're not going to bother you. Now, if you do have an aggressive hive, things can go south, but you know, you want to know your bees. Real quick, class. We're going to jump back to Q&A. We got a little bit of time. Class surveys are on the tables. Please take a minute to fill those out and drop those off, or just leave them on the table. Or we have a box over here on the side wall. Drop that off on your way out. But I do want to go back, open it up to questions and answers. Could y'all please, I apologize, we are live streaming this, and people on the live stream won't be able to hear you unless you use the microphones. So for any of the speakers, guys, y'all want to come up here, tonight's speakers? And any questions you guys have?
All of the pictures I saw where the hives were in direct sunlight. Is it better to not have them under trees and shaded areas? Do they need to be in sunlight to prevent fungus or something?
They need to be in the shade. It'll help with your beetle problem. Arkansas, we have hive beetles. Keeping them in the shade is gonna get more hive beetles. Know what you're doing and why. I keep mine it gets shade half the day and sun the rest of the day. I know that's not optimal for hive beetles, but it's optimal for me because I don't like working in the hot sun. So again, know what you're doing and why, but people will generally recommend put them in full sunlight and you'll be fine and minimize your beetle population. Any other questions for any of our speakers? Please hop up. There's 2 mics.
So what if you're trying to introduce a hive situation into a property that already has really strong annual presence of black and red wasps?
Repeat the question.
Wasps, black and red wasps.
Yeah, so you want to introduce a colony onto a property that already has a really strong presence of black and red wasps. How do you do that?
Well, what you can do is you take an empty Coca-Cola bottle, put a wooden stick in there, and put a water sugar solution 1:1 with boric acid or some other products. The wasps go in, bring the boric acid back to the hive, okay, and you will kill the wasps. So that is one way to do it, okay? Very effective. That's how I do it.
Tips and tricks like that, we cover monthly. Sorry, I'm not trying to cut off the question. I think you can absolutely introduce those hives. What Wynn's talking about is a specific way to deal, poison, how to poison those wasps. I'm not trying to cut him off, just saying we do, and I encourage everybody to come to the monthly meetings because we do try to have topics that are both relevant for the season and then relevant to new beekeepers as well as more experienced beekeepers, right, Scott? That's what we're doing this year. So we're going to have a segment geared more toward the new beginning beekeepers, and then a segment geared toward, some more advanced topics.
But there are different products on the market, very practical, very cheap that you can use. And we use basically also the borax solution to control ants because they like the honey also. Okay.
I wanted to answer that question about hive beetles from personal experience. I had 2 or 3 hives. They were doing wonderful out in the sun. And that experimentation thing that Jay was saying, I said, oh, bees are naturally in the shade. They're inside of trees. They're inside. So I moved my hives into shade underneath these pine trees. And they died. The hive beetles overran them. I mean, all my hives are in the sun. I mean, hive beetles do not like heat, do not like it when it's real. I'm not saying you'll get rid of your hive beetles, but you'll have less of them if you keep them in the sun.
So a little bit of a biology question. It seems like since the colony is a superorganism, everything's really done for the good of the colony. Am I right in understanding that the drones, though, that they actually kind of exist to help create new colonies rather than doing a job within the hive?
I think that's I think that's a correct statement. Yeah, their role is to help from a propagation standpoint. The drones from that hive aren't mating with that queen. The drones from that hive are mating with other queens. But for that hive to be successful, those queens, new queens, also have to go find drones that came from other hives. So,
And then if the young queen goes and finds a drone from another colony and then returns to start laying, right?
yeah, well, she's actually, typically when she's on her mating flight, I didn't mention that, but she will mate with multiple drones in that single flight. So it could be, a dozen different drones that she's mating with during the course of that. And by the way, just from a drone standpoint, the drones do die as soon as they mate. So they'll, they mate up in the air and the drones fall to the ground and the queen goes and keeps looking for other drones. So until that flight's over.
Yeah. One of the neat things about bees is I think it just amazes me. The drones will only fly a certain distance out from the hive, and then they have their drone congregation area. But the queen, the virgin queen, will fly about twice that far. Eliminates inbreeding. Now, how does that happen accidentally,
I have a couple of questions. One of them just being, what are best practices to avoid any casualties when handling, bee casualties when taking the cover off and on, moving frames around? I know y'all mentioned a bee brush. Any other tips or tricks, anything like that?
Let me do those one at a time. Move slowly and deliberately.
Okay.
You're going to squish bees. Anytime you get in a hive, it's going to happen. You want to avoid it. I don't know if anyone here.
Suit up. Oh, here we go. You suit up, definitely. If you remain calm, more than likely your bees will remain calm. It's more of a connecting with nature thing with me because I'm mildly allergic, but this is my purpose. So if I go out by a bee sting, that's fine. And so I commune with my bees. I at least check them at least every 7 to 10 days. I talk to them. They can get used to the timbre of your voice. Clean your tools. Make sure your smoker, you're not using anything abrasive in your smoker. Like they were saying, don't puff the magic drag, smoke them out. Just give them a couple of courtesy puffs every now and then when necessary to move them around. Like I said, not a lot of jostling. Bee brush, I always keep a bee brush on me because when you're putting the boxes back on, you want to make sure that they're not on the sides of your box because, again, that banana smell, you smell that when that alarm pheromone goes down, you got angry bees, and, depending on if you've been stung before, you might end up dropping your box, and then you got a bigger problem. So, like I said, move deliberately, move slowly, take your time. Stay calm, and make sure you have your tools on hand. It helps if you have another person, but again, if you're not really in a rush and you're just kind of communing with them, they'll get used to you. It's more of a vibe, more of a ritual you can get into.
What I heard was, the best advice I heard was don't act like a bear.
Don't use perfumes, hairspray, ladies. That's a no-no. Deodorants, all these typical smells bees don't like. We have even cases where you wash your bee suit in certain detergents that bees don't like and they will go after you. So you need to constantly think and evaluate, what's going on. My wife cannot get within 100 yards of the beehives because they will go after her. And I can walk in front of them and they do nothing. Why? She does not want to stop using her hairspray. She attracts them.
Yep. And I'll give you one, too, that a person in our bee club taught me. You wear that suit, and you're out, and you're working a hive, and they're really mad, and they're stinging, and well, then you come in after that, and the next day or a week later, you go out wearing that same suit. It's got that alarm pheromone all over it, and you wonder, why are the bees so mad today? And he said, wash it. You know, you just wash it and set it outside, and it'll take care of part of your problem. But remember that, okay, if the bees were really mad, I need to clean my suit before I come out next time.
Suit, tools, etc. I use like the sensitive detergents or like the baby type detergents. Anything, no colors, no scents, just as basic of a cleaning agent as you can. And like you said, hang it out to dry. Because natural scent is what you want the bees to smell you. So like you said, try to stay away from anything fragrance-wise or whatnot. But
Yeah, a couple other folks wanted to ask questions. I know we have to head out pretty soon, so I want to make sure everybody else is able to ask that, so I'll probably talk to somebody later.
Yeah, we'll be here next Monday as well.
Would you please speak a little about the impact of the current drought on beekeeping?
The impact on?
The drought does affect beekeeping. In fact, we're checking our sources. One of the things we do this time of year is go around and you can lift up on the backside of the hives or as you go through and see how much food they have to get through the winter. Well, we went on a trip for about 4 or 5 days, and I came back, I thought my hives were all in great shape. And I went to 2 of the hives, and they had really depleted a lot of their resources because there's nothing out there. And this happens again in the winter. A cold winter is better for our bees than a warm winter, because a warm winter, your bees go out and fly around, and there's nothing for them to eat. So what they're doing is burning calories and coming back and consuming more food. Same thing happens in the drought. If there's nothing out there for the bees to consume, then you're probably going to end up having to feed to give them enough to get through the winter.
This year has been particularly dry in basically August, September, October, but also in April. And in April, a lot of the trees were starting to bloom. We didn't have enough water because there was not enough blooming. The queen stopped laying. Then in May, in June, we had enough rain, but we didn't have enough field bees in our hives. So you saw the design, okay, the graph, where the graph shows that in June you should have maximum amount of bees. That graph is good for North Dakota, but not for Arkansas. In Arkansas, we want to have maximum amount of bees in May, when we have maximum nectar flow. And then you accumulate much more nectar, honey reserves in the hives.
Yeah, you see a lot of beekeepers this year, this late in the summer. The people, you always wonder who's buying those 5-pound bags of sugar at the grocery store. It's beekeepers. Because we're having to feed this year, and we haven't in a long time.
So my question is, I know that somebody talked about having like biodiversity in the bees' environment, and there were seed mixes for that. I wanted to know if they're like specific to a state or even more specific to like a region, because I know there's a lot of like diverse environment in Arkansas alone.
yes, so the seed mixes I mentioned from Quail Forever and Pheasants Forever, their website can break it down in the states, regions, and everything like that. It's pretty detailed. And since I work with NRCS, there are specific ones for the Delta region, Northwest area, all that good stuff. So you can't really go wrong with whatever area you're in. They've got a mix particular that's going to be best for your area.
And do they actually have retail sales as well?
Not directly, but they have vendors. They actually have a vendors list.
Okay.
That they
Because
mentioned that
for
will
me, that's
hold
important, because
those.
I've done that too. I said, okay, and I get a dizzying list of things that are hard to find.
You got substitutions.
Getting those sources for the retail. One of the sites, is it when do you know? I'll find it for next Monday and share it with you then, but there is a site where you can buy a seed mix by your region.
Yeah, that's probably the same one.
It may be.
Or similar.
And you just, you state and then part of the state, and then you just
Okay.
give you
Thank
2 or 3 options for buying seeds.
I just had a quick question about supplemental feeding. How do you know when your bees need an extra bit of sugar water, or when is it not a good time to feed them?
You have to go through your hives to see how much they have, or because you don't open hives in the wintertime, you know, unless it's above 60 degrees or so, you get in the practice of just reaching and lifting up the back of your hive, and you'll feel, and you won't know the first time. But the 30th time when you go around and you lift up and you go, whoa, that one needs, and then you figure that's when you have to, especially as you go into the winter, because bees can't eat when it's really cold. So you have to feed them, you know, and they can only get up, and so you have to come up with techniques to feed them. Are you talking about now, or are you talking about just in general?
Just in general.
Then you just go through your hive. When you go through your hive, you'll notice, oh, they really don't have anything, or they're, and what will happen, and for those of you wanting to have bees, if you have 2 hives instead of 1 hive, you can compare. Having 2 hives is really an advantage. If you need to make another queen, you can get products from 1 hive to help make queens in another hive. You can compare. If you only got 1 hive, you don't know whether it's doing really good, kind of good, bad, you know, and unless you have a mentor or somebody that comes by and looks for you.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that next time. When you're installing bees, you definitely want to feed at the beginning, and as we mentioned here, I do apologize for having to cut this off. I asked that we do have to cut, you know, the library closes. They'll start here in less than 4 minutes. You'll start hearing announcements on the PA. We got to get out of here. So again, I hope you enjoyed tonight. Look forward to seeing you next Monday. Bring your questions. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more time for Q&A. Please grab a snack for the road, and we'll see you next Monday.